Okay. It is a great joy to be here with you today. My name is Paula Harris-White. I am the Diversity Manager for King County.
And my name is Matias Valenzuela. I'm the Director of the Office of Equity and Social Justice in King County.
And what you just experienced is what we call BIBO, breathe in, breathe out. It's to center you and bring your full attention to today, to being at the conference, to being with all these beautiful people from around the country that you're going to meet and learn from, and to kind of let everything else melt away so that you can bring your full attention and your full openness and learning awareness to this event. So I wanted to take a minute and thank our musicians in the back, Ben and Joe. They have this kind of cool sound which fuses folk music with banjo music and the blues, and they are playing all around Seattle. They also teach children, so they will be playing again in a few minutes, but just wanted to show some appreciation to them because of the wonderful work they've been doing.
All right, what a crowd. We actually, this event, we're at over 500 here, 540, Paula?
Close to 550.
Yeah, and that's quite a, and if we would have planned it maybe even better, we would have been able to expand here in the last moment, because we have had sold out for about a month now, and we probably could have fit in a couple hundred more people. So it just shows the level of interest around this work, which is wonderful. We're starting off with some formalities, and here I also want to actually recognize the Governing for Racial Equity Steering Committee. They've been overall leading the work of the network. Paula Harris-White is one of those members, but I'm going to ask some of the other people, and she's also the chair of this particular conference today. But I'm going to ask some of the other folks to actually also stand up, please. Judith Lowry with City of Portland, Zoe Polk with San Francisco Human Rights Commission, Ben Duncan with Multnomah County, Diana Fulchuk with the City of Seattle. Thank you.
And so I, in particular, want to thank the folks who really put the conference on. Everything you see here is because of all the hard work that they did. And I would ask the following people to stand up. Joanne Fox. Joanne? Richard Gelb. Brunette Mitchell. Arun Samatero. Beth Taylor. Kelly Williams. Richard Kingsbury. And Jeff Selby from Portland.
All right, so why are we here? I think we often hear about some very urgent issues and pressing matters, such as bias and violence in policing, and repeated incidences. Even this week, we had a situation in a pool in Texas, McKinney, Texas, in which some youth were trying to enjoy a pool day and broke into, given some of the attitudes and kind of the violence too from neighbors and from police, that actually very quickly turned into a pretty ugly incident. But we have very chronic situations that are also slow killers, and it's just what I'm referring to here is the institutionalized and structural racism and the lack of opportunity that we see throughout our country. We're 5 decades past the end of legal segregation in this country, and we still, though, have some pretty significant gaps that continue. I mean, the gap between black and whites in terms of unemployment hasn't changed. Actually, it's still quite wide. And the same thing if we look at things such as wealth. More recently, following the Great Recession, the wealth gap between Latinos and whites, Latinos and blacks compared to whites has actually increased. And other things, for example, in terms of poverty, Native Americans and American Indians, 1 in 4 live in poverty compared to whites, which is 1 in 10. Pretty significant. Similar, we can run down and look at education, we can look at the justice system, and we see some very bleak numbers there. But we also see at the same time that there's some issues or some areas we can actually begin to make a difference. If we look at healthcare and enrollment, even before the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, the gap was actually decreasing between blacks and whites in terms of the uninsured. Or we look at life expectancy between whites and Latinos has been actually shrinking. So we know that many things are actually getting worse, definitely, but also that we can actually, due to our efforts, and just as we created these inequities in the situations in our community, we can also turn some things around when we put some of our concerted effort. And this is what this is really about, why we're here, to make that difference in terms of racial equity.
And so some of you may wonder, what is the Governing for Racial Equity Network? Because it's a great conference, whether you're a member of the network or not. The network is really the effort of 5 jurisdictions, Portland, Seattle, King County, Multnomah County, and the San Francisco Human Rights Commission. It started basically back with the first conference that was done by Seattle. And Seattle did 2 conferences, and then in 2012, they passed it off to Portland and Multnomah County, who were happy to do it, and our last conference was last year in Portland and Multnomah, and this year King County picked it up. And basically, it's a learning organization. It's a loose organization. I would say our affiliations are a lot based on our relationships, our work together. We try to learn from each other. We also try to share our learnings about racial equity with others, and that is why we do this conference. It's an opportunity for people to come together, to learn from each other. Most of the presenters you see today are also registered at this conference. So we come together to teach each other and learn from each other. We will be talking about the network more on Friday afternoon and how you can participate in the network and join the network, because we are opening it up to additional membership from other jurisdictions. And so we look forward to working with all of you in the future and other opportunities to come together and learn. And I just wanted to say one thing. The people who registered you today, I just wanted to give a shout out to a committee that I work with, the EEOAA Advisory Committee. They came in, although they're all registered, they came in and volunteered to register all of you today. So just let's give them a hand.
So we want to see who's in the room. We have folks from all over the country, actually, although there has been a traditional focus on the Pacific Northwest and Northern California, too. People come from all over the country. So what do you want to do? Have people yell, stand up?
Yeah, whatever you want to do, whatever your region does to recognize themselves as they are doing crazy, wonderful things. So from California, we have Salinas. Oakland, San Francisco. And we know there are a few cities that we missed, so what other California cities did we miss?
Oh, Richmond, California, yeah.
Whoa. They may be few, but they are mighty, because they stand. From Oregon, we've got Portland. Multnomah County. Anyone else from Portland?
Or from Oregon?
Oregon.
Eugene.
Eugene.
Okay.
Whoa.
Sacramento. Let's try the state of Washington. First, city of Seattle. Let's call out some of our cities. Renton. Tequila. There is Tequila in the house. Maybe they're in the restroom. There we go. And moving outside of our particular county, Tacoma. All right. And Pierce County. All right. And what about King County?
The state of Washington. Okay. How about New York City? Oh, okay.
Washington, D.C.
Norfolk, Virginia. How about Fairfax, Virginia?
All right. and just general Midwest.
It's on you.
All right. Intro?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. All right, so I'm now very honored to introduce to you our King County Executive, Dow Constantine. Dow Constantine was elected to his second term as King County Executive in 2013. Executive Constantine is a former member of the King County Council and the Washington State Senate and House of Representatives, and a three-time University of Washington alum. He recently proposed Best Starts for Kids, a levy-funded program that will provide the resources to put every child in King County on a path towards lifelong success. This proposal is the definition of upstream, prevention, and equity. Personally, I feel very privileged to work for an executive who is so deeply committed to equity and social justice. You will hear words from him, but he's not simply about words. He's about focus, attention to detail, and making equity work central to the mission of King County government and government in general, so we can all be proud to work in government. Let's welcome our King County Executive, Dow Constantine.
Thank you, Matthias. Yes, attention to detail. While Matthias was introducing me, I was trying to compare two lists of elected officials who are here this morning and figure out which list is correct, because I'm charged with introducing them. This is going to be a failure early on in my speech, okay? Good morning. Welcome to the conference, and for those of you who are not from here, welcome to King County. I am thrilled to look out and see more than 500 people, and hundreds more are probably still making their way through traffic and up the escalators. It was a typically difficult morning out there on Seattle streets. We're joined today by many elected officials and employees from our county, from King County, and many others from cities around the county. We have 39 cities in King County, and representatives, of course, from our fellow counties and cities in our region. I know the state of California is well represented today. I was hearing that. Thank you. There's water in the back, and you're free to take some of that home with you. Don't tell William Shatner, he'll want it all. And I appreciate those of you from the Midwest just being introduced as a group. When it said, "Oh, the flyover states, are you here today?" And it's like, yeah. I do want to recognize some of the elected officials, and they're just simply going to be omissions, which we will correct later in the morning, okay? Is everybody comfortable with that? First of all, and I'm going to ask you to, I'm not going to ask you to hold your applause, I'm just going to ask you to applaud quickly when these people stand up. From the city of Santa Ana, Councilmember David Benavides. From King County Superior Court, Judge Monica Benton. City of Oakland, Councilmember Desley Brooks. The City Auditor of Portland, Mary Hull Caballero. King County Superior Court Judge John Chun. City of Portland Commissioner Amanda Fritz. Contra Costa County Board Supervisor John Gioia. King County Council member and longtime Seattle civil rights leader Larry Gossett. Oh, this is hip. City of Coachella Mayor Stephen Hernandez. City of Kent, Washington, Councilmember Dennis Higgins. The City Attorney of the City of Seattle, Peter Holmes. From the City of Sacramento, Mayor Cassandra Jennings. From the City of Soledad, Mayor Fred Ledesma. Seattle City Council member retiring at the end of this year, Nick Licata. Seattle City Council member Mike O'Brien. City of Tukwila Councilmember Deshaun Quinn. King County Superior Court Judge John Rule. Judge Wesley St. Clair. Judge Catherine Schaefer. The Mayor of Madison, Wisconsin, Paul Soglin. From the City of Renton, Councilmember Greg Taylor. From the City of Tacoma, Councilmember Lauren Walker. From the Federal Way School Board, Claire Wilson. And Councilmember from the City of Tacoma, Victoria Woodards. So when I sit down, I'm going to look at the other list and compare it against the one I read so we can fix some of this later, okay? I want to thank the 4 jurisdictions that joined us in organizing this gathering: the City of Seattle, the City of Portland, Multnomah County, and our friends from the City of San Francisco. We are glad you're here because here in King County, the county named for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we take his life's work, his principles seriously and strive to live up to the challenge he set before us to create a fair and just society. As the elected leader of this diverse and growing county of more than 2 million now, I've made equity and social justice central to our work. My core commitment is to create the conditions where every person has a fair shot at success, irrespective of race or wealth or the neighborhood in which they live, where all are valued, where all are able to flourish. You know, in the highly competitive global economy of the 21st century, no person is expendable. But even as our strengths as a region attract people from all over the globe, as Matthias alluded, King County suffers from a disturbing inequality, and I think a growing inequality of income and a disturbing inequality of opportunity. The average income in one zip code can be $100,000 less than one just a few miles away. Even more disturbing, average life expectancy is 10 years shorter in, say, South Auburn than it is just a few miles north on Mercer Island. Unemployment, as was mentioned, among African Americans is twice what it is for whites here in King County. This is unacceptable, not just philosophically, and not just morally unacceptable. A growing body of evidence shows that places with greater social and economic equity have greater economic growth and overall prosperity. You can clap for that. You know, across our nation, with events in Ferguson, in New York, and last week in McKinney, Texas, these events have generated outrage and also renewed energy behind change and a demand for fair treatment for all by our police and our justice system. As governments, we're confronted with the nature of what still exists in America: persistent, lingering, corrosive effects of hundreds of years of first slavery and then Jim Crow, and then mass incarceration and structural racism. Well, here in King County, we have enshrined our vision for an equitable government into law through the adoption of the fair and just principle in our strategic plan. Simply put, we seek to integrate the values of equity and social justice into our every action as a government in service of the people. Every decision, every policy, every practice. Just let me share 4 quick examples of how we are putting our words into action. In 2013, with the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, I set the countywide goal of full enrollment in affordable health care. It was an all-hands-on-deck approach, not just our health department, but all of our employees, and not just our employees, but all of our partners, public and private, throughout the county. And we were able to bring new affordable health care to nearly 200,000 residents of King County in just the first year of that effort. You know, we run the transit agency, and of course, like most transit agencies, we've had financial challenges. We've had to raise fares to be able to keep the buses on the road, but in raising fares, we are making it more difficult for those whose only transportation option is our transit system to be able to do the things they need to do in their lives, to get to that class, to get to that job interview, to get the kid to daycare. So we undertook to create an income-based system, and we have just launched the nation's second, thanks for the example, San Francisco, major metropolitan transit low-fare system. It's a reduced fare for low-income riders. For $1.50, you can get anywhere, anytime in King County. We call it Orca Lift, and it's received interest from across the nation. Third, to address troubling reports of lack of workplace equity at our bus agency, Metro Transit, we went beyond the usual grievance process, and we joined with our Transit Operators Union to create the Partnership to Achieve Comprehensive Equity, or PACE. This is a labor management committee. Started working on a design for a new recruitment process, one that was transparent and supported a diverse pool of applicants. And this is what we as employers often struggle with. And as a result, from within our agency, we found new leaders, and 5 of 7 new leadership positions at Metro Transit have just been filled by women or people of color from our agency. I know I'm going to mess up the schedule right now, but I just want to tell one quick anecdote. There was a gentleman who worked at Metro Transit, and he had a very unconventional resume. In addition to his professional work with us, he had spent quite a bit of time in a refugee camp in Africa. And this PACE process allowed us to help him take his experiences and put them in terms that would explain why he would be a good leader at the transit agency, a non-standard candidate, a candidate who didn't fit the mold. But we are finding ways to be more inclusive, and this PACE process is one that we want to replicate across our organization. King County, fourth, has been a leader in creating alternatives to juvenile detention. But even as the total number of youth in detention has been reduced by close to 75%, and that's something of which we're very proud, the racial disparity in the system has grown. Black youth represent 8% of the youth in King County. They represent 50% of the youth in juvenile detention. So I've joined with our Superior Court judges, many of whom are here today, to aggressively act to further limit the use of secure detention. For example, with specific targets for diverting youth whose only offense might be truancy, skipping school, or running from foster care, or missing a court date. But these are tangible actions. Despite these tangible actions, here's the sad truth, the truth that everybody in this room has to confront. It's shared by every community across this country. The top predictor of a child's success in life is the income of the household into which they're born and in which they're raised. Not whether you're bright or hardworking or determined or creative or have much to contribute. No, the question is whether mommy and daddy have money. Our goal must be to break this connection between incomes and outcomes. That is why I have launched this initiative that was mentioned to improve our shared future, and it's called Best Starts for Kids. We propose to ask voters to invest in proven and promising strategies that will put every child in King County on a path toward lifelong success. Science, including much science being done right here at the University of Washington, tells us that early experiences, both positive and negative, have a dramatic impact on the physical shape and organization of the brain and brain physiology. And these experiences help determine not just what we learn, but our capacity to learn and to succeed, to solve problems, to create, to work well with others. We want to be the first metropolitan region in the nation to create a comprehensive approach that's needed to deliver the outcomes we all want to see. We want to invest intensively in the child's first 5 years, starting with that young pregnant woman who may not have the resources she needs or the support she needs to have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy birth. And then following those kids along to make sure they're getting the support, they're getting the enrichment they need for their young brains to develop and for them to arrive at preschool and then arrive at kindergarten on par with their peers and ready to learn and ready to succeed. That's what has happened. That's the difference between the kid who's born in a household that has the luxury of money and time and the household that is struggling just to hang on. We can help make up for some of that difference, and that's what Best Starts for Kids is about. We will sustain the gain throughout the school years. We'll work with these kids. We'll screen for developmental delay early on because we know if we address developmental delay early on, we can dramatically reduce the impacts. And as kids get older, we can now have universal screening for emerging mental health challenges because those too, when dealt with early, do not become life-consuming problems. And third, we will create healthy communities. Our communities of opportunity work with the Seattle Foundation, which we're just beginning in 3 communities, actually engages those communities in designing what is needed by them rather than having the government presume to come and say, we have a one-size-fits-all solution and here's what you need to do. I am proud of the things that King County is doing, and we are very eager to learn from you as well, what's happening around our region, what's happening around our nation. This conference is an opportunity to hold ourselves accountable and to advance the work so we can eventually eliminate inequities within each of our communities and ultimately free our nation from the burden we have inherited. Together, we can build a racial equity movement. We have much to talk about, we have much to learn, and we have much to share. So thank you for joining us today to create a more just and equitable America. Thank you very much.
Our next 2 speakers are Council Member Larry Gossett and community activist Robert Bob, or Uncle Bob as he is fondly known, Santos. During the late 60s, Larry Gossett, Bob Santos, Bernie Whitebear, and Roberto Maestes joined together to create a powerful community alliance for social justice, and they were known as the Four Amigos or the Gang of Four. It is said when the Gang of Four left their houses in the morning, they never forgot that their community struggles were integrally tied to the struggles abroad and the people who struggled around the world. Robert Bob Santos is the most publicly recognized spokesperson and leader of the movement that began in the 1970s to preserve Seattle's International District, or known as the ID. In the 1960s, Bob became involved in the civil rights struggles through his involvement in the Catholic Church. From 1972 to 1989, he served as the executive director of the International District Improvement Association, known as Interim. During his tenure at Interim, the International District was facing tremendous external development pressures. They were building I-5, they were building I-90, the King Dome was being built, and the Metro Tunnel. So all of these things were impacting this community. Under Bob's leadership, Interim organized property owners, businesses, residents, and activists from the Asian American community to preserve the neighborhood by renovating existing housing and building new housing. From 1889 to 1993, he oversaw the Seattle Chinatown International District Preservation Authority. Bob also served as the regional director of the Department of Housing and Urban Development from 1994 through 2001. Now, during his spare time, he just finished writing a book named The Gang of Four, which he is promoting, which is published in May of 2015, and he advocates for housing for the homeless. Larry. My council member, Larry Gossett, because I live in his district, serves in the Metropolitan King County Council, and he is chair of the Employment and Administration Committee. He also serves in the Law, Justice, and Emergency Management, Health, Housing, and Human Services, and Regional Policy Committees. When he was a student, he was an activist at the University of Washington. He fought to eliminate racial discrimination and increase the enrollment of African Americans and other students of color. He also was the founder of the Black Students Union at UW. With Bob, Bernie Whitebear, and Robert Mastes, they founded the Minority Executive Directors Coalition of King County, an organization, I think, which still exists. He also spearheaded the campaign to change the logo. So if you look at King County's logo, it used to be a crown, which is kind of interesting, King County having a crown as a logo. Not exactly what we were trying to achieve in this country, right? But King County decided with the work of Larry Gossett and other community members to change that logo to the logo that we now love and revere. And you see on every county item, from business cards to the sheriff's department's police cars, every place you'll see a beautiful face of Dr. King. And that work was something that Larry Gossett made happen, and he stayed on this issue until it was passed by the King County Council by a unanimous vote in 2007. He also Larry was elected to council in 1993 and has served continuously since then. He advocates for programs that help inner city youth and reduce racial and class disparities at our local criminal justice systems. I'm really thrilled now to introduce you to Uncle Bob, Santos, and Larry Gossett.
Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. I've always dreamed of speaking at the Washington State Convention Center. Thank you very much. Those of you who are trying to take a nap, welcome. Now, we're part of the Gang of Four, and as Paula mentioned, we just completed writing a book about our experience working together, and they call us the Gang of Four or the Four Amigos. Now, I just want to tell you a little bit. I grew up in the International District, Chinatown, Manila Town, Japantown area of Seattle. In the early days, at the turn of the last century, the immigrants from the Philippines, China, Japan were segregated into this neighborhood. And growing up in, we call it the International District now, was really a cool place to grow up. I mean, it was an ethnic neighborhood. And there's a book that was published several years ago by a guy named Paul DeBarros. And the title is Jackson Street After Hours. And those of you who are local here probably might know this, but there were 23 nightclubs in our neighborhood through the 30s, the 40s, and to the 50s. And so that was my environment growing up. My father was a prize fighter, came from the Philippines. He had no skills, but he liked to fight. So he became a professional prize fighter. And you can look his name up in Ring magazine, Sammy Santos. He had 120 professional fights, double that of Manny Pacquiao. Manny earned a little more money, but a little bit more. Anyway, so my dad was a widower. My mom passed away when I was very early tender age, and And then Dad lost his eyesight in 1945. So I became a seeing eye dog, and I'd bring him all around our neighborhood. And it was really, he was still, now my dad was a sports hero in Seattle and in the Northwest, not just for the Filipino community or the Asian community, but all of Seattle, because we didn't have, there weren't any professional sports at that time. You had the University of Washington football team, the Seattle Rainier minor baseball team, and you had my dad sucking Sammy Santos. So growing up, I could tell the kids my dad could beat your dad, that kind of stuff, and so we're living in an environment where a male-dominated district, because all these immigrants were segregated to this area, and because of the immigration laws at that time prohibited more Asians. The first wave would come, but they weren't able to bring their wives or their fiancés to this country. So it was male-dominated. And once a month or so at our hotel, NP Hotel on 6th Avenue, we had a small hotel room, and it was called a single-room occupancy unit. My dad's buddies would show up. Julian, he was the commissary, he was in charge of commissary at the naval base at Pier 91, and he would bring the food. Danny, he was a famous bootlegger in our neighborhood. He would send up the booze, and a couple other guys would come in, a couple of former prize fighters, and then two ladies would show up, Marge and Dixie, two white ladies, young, and they were the house professionals. The guys didn't have their loved ones, so the ladies of the evening would help out, and during the weekday, I would be attending parochial school, and I was an altar boy.
An altar.
Can you just imagine, those of you who are Catholics, everything is you think about as a sin. I spent a lot of time in confession because I'm serving Mass, on Friday, and then Saturday I'm with this group of really cool people, earthy kind of people. So that's growing up in the International District. Segue into the 70s and 80s. I came back to my neighborhood and directed a program called the International District Improvement Association. And you just have to picture my neighborhood. You close your eyes and you're in your own home. And out your left window is a freeway, I-5. Out the back door is another freeway, I-90. And on the front door, on the side, on the west side of your house, is a stadium, the Kingdom, replaced by two other stadiums. And then on the north side is the government center encroaching on your neighborhood. So we're surrounded by concrete. And we looked at other neighborhoods around the country, and we saw that ethnic neighborhoods, the tenants, the residents of those neighborhoods were being displaced because of all this progress, of all this development, pushing people out. And in our community, we became sort of activists. Some other folks were radicals, and we depended on each other to come up with a force so that we could protest the building of the stadiums and the encroachment of developers into our neighborhood. So we built housing, we built health clinics, we built community gardens, we built nutrition programs for the elderly. And if you go to my neighborhood today, now this was in the 60s when I started working there. If you go to my neighborhood today, the International District, we're still around, we're still a neighborhood, and you ain't gonna somewhere. No. So I was executive director of the International District Improvement Association. Larry was executive director of Central Area Motivation Program in the Black community. Bernie Whitebear, he was the leader of the Native American Indian movement to acquire Fort Lawton that was being surplused by the federal government. He and his brothers and sister occupied the fort, and segue a couple of years later, he was able to negotiate 20 acres in this beautiful park setting to build the Native American Cultural Center, and it's still there.
United Indians of all tribes.
Yeah, United Indians of All Tribes Foundation. And then, of course, Maestas, he occupies an old school building on Beacon Hill, and sat there in the cold of winter, and Larry Gossett was sitting in those cramped quarters, and and finally Roberto was able to acquire that old building for the center called the El Centro de la Raza, which was a service center. The service center for the Latinos and other people in the neighborhood. Now, that was, this was activism and radicalism at its highest. And then you segue into today. On that property, Roberto, his wife Stella Ortega, Roberto passed away a couple years ago, and then Stella took over, and they're building right now on that El Centro site 120 units of affordable housing, brand new housing. There will be a child care center, social services, and retail space on that property. It's about a $46 million project. So between all four of us, we've been able to generate millions and millions of dollars of mostly public financing to build things that we need to build for the people. Larry, you're on.
As usual, Bob left me 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And I am not going to start with a song, because by the time I finish it, exactly 2/3 of y'all will be out the door. But like Bob has said, I am a member of the legislative body that governs our county. Our county executive, Dow Constantine, you just heard from, and we're very proud to be leaders in a diverse county, the 12th or 13th largest in the country, with a population of 2.14 million people. But since we're talking about governing for racial equity, I would just like to spend the minutes that I have giving you a few statistics that I think will help you to better appreciate the challenges, despite the organizing work that Bob has already indicated to you that we've been about. And I really concur with him. We've been more successful in King County, Washington, of bringing about equitable accountability from government officials because we worked hard at creating cross-racial alliances because we consciously saw the potential and the power of unity amongst African American, Asian, Latino, and Native American people. And always, I must add this, we got very good support here in the greater Seattle from progressive-minded whites, and together that has significantly made a difference. But here's our challenges now. In Martin Luther King County, 1/2, according to our demographers, 1/2 of all the children under the age of 18 are youth of color. Very few people know that or even think about it when they're thinking about the great Pacific Northwest. Of the 2 million people who reside here, 38% are people of color. A couple months ago on the front page of the Seattle Times, they put an article there that said, and because this is a very rich county, like the 3rd or 4th richest in the country, and if we were a country, we'd still be in the top 10 in terms of actual wealth controlled by those of us who reside here. But it said the rich are getting richer and the black are getting poorer. This article pointed out that in Seattle in 2015, the average black household, that means everybody in there that's working, the average income in 2015 was $25,700 per year. That we had plummeted to the 8th lowest black population in the entire country in terms of household income. And concomitantly, at the same time, the white income had risen to $70,200 a year. That's not twice, that's almost 3 times as much. And I think more importantly, the wealth differential had grown rather significantly in that in 2005, the wealth differential between white households and black households in Seattle, Washington was about 10 times. In other words, whites had about 10 times the wealth of black households. But as a result of the tremendous recession of 2008 and other factors, the wealth differential had dramatically increased, not became closer as we desire. So in 2015, the wealth differential between the average black family in Seattle, Washington, and the average white family in Seattle, Washington, had grown to 20 times. These are extremely serious problems. And that is why the executive pointed out that in terms of our criminal justice system, despite these issues, we've made a lot of progress in reducing the number of men and women in our King County Jail and in our detention center. But when it comes to racial disproportionality, the problem is even worse. On this morning, I was at a breakfast of the Breakfast Group, which is a black men's organization. Matter of fact, our average income is $92,000, those of us who are members of the Breakfast Group, and it's 84 of us that are members. But we have a commitment to reach back and give back to at-risk African American children, particularly black youth. And we talk about the fact that since January of 2014, the majority of people being referred by all the police departments in Martin Luther King Jr. County are now black, in a county that's has only 10% of its youth are black, but over 50% of those being referred to the King County prosecutor for allegedly committing criminal crimes are African Americans. The majority, that's hard to do, but somehow in our county we have done it. I share those statistics with all of you just to say that our government and our people, despite the creative stories that we are able to tell you about our ability to bring about change and reform that's decent, that's necessary. We became the first city in the nation to adopt a $15 an hour wage. That was fantastic. Led by, I hope this don't scare y'all, led by a socialist city council person, Shama Sawant, who paradoxically now is being challenged by an African-American woman. We still have many challenges. It is my hope in closing that during the 2 or 3 days that you all will be here, that you will work very diligently and in a disciplined fashion to identify strategies that we can use in Martin Luther King Jr. County. Keep using him as an inspiration to figure out how we can continue to bring about racial equity and how we can involve our elected officials and government entities, both local and statewide, in this effort to create more racial equity. And thank you very much for whatever it is you're able to do.
Thank you, Larry. This is a book. Anyway, I just want to share one thing. Both Larry and I were activists, and he was a radical, and I was sort of just an activist. And but we knew how important we knew how important it was to learn and get involved in the political system, because our organizations, we were nonprofits, and so we had to generate resources from the public sector. Thank you, King County. Thank you, federal government. And I'm sitting in my office in the International District one day, and I get a call in 1994. The Secretary of HUD wants to talk to me. And everybody has a secretary. I said, oh, that's nice, you know. I'll bring her to lunch. Just kidding. That's bad. Anyway, so it was Henry Cisneros, and he was looking for a regional administrator for the Northwest area of Department of Housing and Urban Development, in charge of Washington, Oregon, Alaska, and Idaho. And so I was offered this job as an administrator, regional administrator, for a bureaucracy, the largest bureaucracy ever created. HUD, 200 programs with those 200 acronyms and all that stuff. I only knew 3 of them. I knew public housing, I knew FHA, and I knew block grant. So when I was talking to Secretary Cisneros, I wanted him to ask me a question about those 3, but he didn't do that. He offered me the job, and I had to think about that. Did I want to leave my comfort zone in the International District, where I could make a phone call and the 200 people there would be there the next day on a demonstration, that kind of stuff? And I loved being that. It was an adrenaline rush every day. So I asked the folks at HUD, how much does it pay? And so I decided to sacrifice my comfort zone to work in this bureaucracy. And it was the easiest job I've ever even dreamed of. Everything is done for you. We have a couple hundred people around the region, government workers like you all, government workers that work in a cylinder, and they did their jobs professionally and wonderful. They were wonderful. But I was the regional administrator, and I was told that I represented the administration, the White House. I said, I'll never have this kind of influence ever again. So what do you do? So really shortly, I opened up the federal building as a homeless shelter for women. And the reason why, it's a public building. The federal building is a public building. You have lights, and you have heat, and you have restrooms, and you have showers, and federal employees leave at 6:30 in the evening, and they don't come back till 8 o'clock in the morning. And our shelter for women, the women came in at 8 o'clock, and they left at 6:30 in the morning, so the government people never saw them. And we did it because no one ever told me we couldn't. Oh, kick ass! Oh, there's a time thing going on, but and I've always been worried about time. Oh boy. So we have bookmarkers promoting the book. We can't sell the book here, but we have bookmarkers that my nieces will be passing out to those of you who are interested in a bookmarker that promotes the book. Okay?
On that note.
So I want to say thank you very much to our esteemed speakers here.
Question and answers.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
And so we're going to open it up for questions, but I just want to say that when I grow up, I want to be like Uncle Bob and Larry. Uncle Bob is retired, right? Can you believe he's actually retired?
Yeah.
And
But he's still active.
Pardon? What'd you say?
He's still active.
He's still
but
very
he-
active, right? That's the type of retirement that I'm looking forward to. So if you have any questions now, there are a couple of microphones out there, and find a microphone and come ask a question.
Where are the microphones?
Right there.
The microphones, I think that gentleman found
you
one.
can see them?
Good morning, and thank you. This is a wonderful conference. My name is Daryl Rogers. I work in public health, environmental public health specifically. So one of the things that came to mind to me was that we're talking about racial equity. And it wasn't until, I've been working in the environmental justice area since the 90s, but it wasn't until I started working with my director, Dr. Ngozi Alero, that she explained the difference of what equity means versus equal. And I know there's a wonderful slide, I don't know if we have it here, that shows the difference between equal and equity. And I think that's necessary to explain so that we have that in our minds as we move forward through these next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So actually, I have a question for you. How did you make the transition from being out in the community, activists, sitting in buildings, getting arrested, shaking up things, shaking up people, making trouble, to being inside people, because both of you became government officials. How'd you make that transition?
Yeah, and I have had the opportunity of sharing a cell with Bob, Roberto, and Bernie in the 1960s because we went to jail for organizing in the third world communities here in Seattle. My specific response to that question is that the change of me becoming closer to electoral politics and thinking that we can make a difference occurred during the years that I was chair of the Rainbow Coalition when Jesse Louis Jackson in 1984 and then again in 1988 ran for president. In the interim, we were organizing all over the state of Washington, and I was really quite surprised that through disciplined, focused organizing that has a long-term vision about the kind of empowerment that we thought our oppressed people needed, that we were actually able to get people 20% in Washington state, a 3% statewide black population. We got 20% of the vote in the primaries in 1984, and then in 1988 we got 39% of all the Democratic vote in the state of Washington. With this, I said, damn, we can organize around electoral issues and actually make a difference. I became more and more involved in electoral politics after that. Bob, did you want to respond?
That's what I was going to say.
That's what he's going to say. Okay, next question.
Okay, so you have before you government employees from all over the country. If you wanted to give them a message about the work they should be doing, what is that message that you would share with them?
I would share as a county legislator the idea, because I think it's so very important. I was just talking yesterday with several of the members of our auditing staff, and we were talking about how through audits and creatively looking at how we carry out audits and think outside the box, the kind of recommendations that we can make becoming recommendations that auditors or the persons whom they serve, both as bosses and the people that reside in the jurisdiction, never dreamt about. And they're able to come to these conclusions based on the audits that they've done. Like we were talking about law enforcement oversight and how we could make significant progress by changing just the ordinance that governs it. And then 9 council members can do it. And we could use the audit to say that, well, we just want to do what the auditor said, create performance that's at a much higher level and based on best practices. But as a result of it, actually has the potential of having very progressive reforms. It has the potential of being transformative. So thinking outside the box, through whatever the day-to-day level of government service we're in, and being willing to recommend changes that you see will benefit us moving toward racial equity and fairness and more significant involvement of the people that oftentimes, most time, are left out. It can be done. That's what I would say.
Now, we learned how to do a lot of lobbying when we were in the community, and one of the things I learned about lobbying elected officials, I never took County Executive Dow Constantine to lunch. I took his legislative aides to lunch. Because those are the folks that hit their bosses and say, this is a good idea, that's not a good idea, this is a good idea. And the legislative aides many times influence the decisions of their boss. Cindy Domingo here has been with Larry for 35 years. He's chief of staff of Larry's office. When I need something done, I don't go to Larry because Larry has his thought process is limited. He's sort of focused on one thing all the time, where Cindy is open to the world, and she knows the programs to direct me to that might have the resources that I need. Now, while I'm still on the mic, I want to tell.
Wait a minute, man.
I want to tell a story from the book, and I got to do this because two of our members are no longer here. Bernie White Bear passed away in 2000, and Roberto passed away just a few years ago. But Bernie's driving to work one day, and Bernie fixed cars, and one of his beat-up cars had static on the radio. But he hears the announcer on the radio saying, "The Cherokees are surrounding Washington, D.C." And Bernie said, "Gotta be there. Got to be there in D.C. to help my brothers and sisters, the Cherokee brothers and sisters, the last Indian uprising." So he's driving to his office. He calls the staff and says, "I got to get a flight out." And he's going up to the doorway. His staff member runs out and says, Bernie Bear, slow down a little bit." The announcer said, "Cherry trees." Washington, D.C. is being surrounded by cherry trees in bloom. The other short story is about Roberto Maestas, the other guy that passed away just a few years ago. We have the mic, right? So the big celebration in Seattle every year is Seafair during the summertime. It's a citywide, countywide celebration, seafaring, all that kind of stuff. And Roberto is anointed King Neptune. I mean, he's the biggest. He's King Neptune of the Seafair celebration. And every year, towards the end of Seafair, they have the hydroplane races at Lake Washington, just thousands and thousands of people on the shores of Lake Washington, 250, 300,000 people. And the Blue Angels are coming over, whoom! And Roberto stands up, and he's on the stage with admirals, Marine Corps generals, Coast Guard admirals, and all these mayors and people, and he's yelling at the Blue Angels, "This is a waste of taxpayers' money. This is the influence of the military-industrial complex." As 200,000 people are yelling for more of the Blue Angels,
Well, I think on that story, so Uncle Bob is telling you that if you are so inclined to, buy the book. And we just want to thank them for their stories and their sharing, and most of all, what they have given our community. We all benefit from it today. The organizations they created, El Centro is still standing strong. There are other organizations, too many to name, that they are involved in and were crucial in the creation of. So again, thank you so much for spending the morning with us.